Welcome. My name is Eric Simon, and I'd like to welcome you to the August 7th, 2025 Simon Wiesenthal Center webinar, where we engage with dialogue with people who have interesting insights into the world around us. Today, we are joined by someone who is not merely making interesting insights into the world, but who is working every day to make an active difference. As the executive director of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, Reverend Johnnie Moore has presided over the delivery of tens of millions of meals to Palestinians in Gaza, often under difficult and very complex conditions. He has advised both Democrat and Republican administrations, and for his tireless efforts on behalf of the defense of religious liberty, he is actually the youngest ever recipient of the Simon Wiesenthal Center's Medal of Valor. We are honored to have Reverend Johnnie Moore with us today. Dialoguing with Reverend Johnnie Moore is Rabbi Abraham Cooper of the Simon Wiesenthal Center. Rabbi Cooper has been with the Simon Wiesenthal Center for 47 years. He has met with and advised popes, presidents, and prime ministers. He has defended the Jewish people, the state of Israel, and he has defended religious liberty on every continent around the world. And we are looking forward to a robust and interesting conversation. Thank you, Rabbi Cooper.
Thank you, Eric, and welcome, Reverend Moore. I think for the purposes of this time together, I will do to you what you have done to me over the years. You always call me Rabbi. I'll be calling you Reverend throughout the 45 plus minutes together. And I just want to also start out by saying that this is an unusual opportunity for the members of the Simon Wiesenthal Center and the hundreds of other interested individuals around the world to get real-time insight on one of the world's most complicated and complex issues at ground zero during wartime. So I'd like to dive right in, if I can, and start with the following. We know that in terms of Gaza, whenever you refer to humanitarian concerns and issues, the acronym UNRWA came up, that the United Nations has basically been in charge of feeding, educating, and giving medical care to the 2 million or so people who are in the Gaza Strip. October 7th, 2023 changed everything. And I believe you've been the acting chairman of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation for 2 months. So, for starters, what was the situation that you found on the ground when you took this job? How have things changed? And if you can just start by explaining what exactly is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation?
First of all, Rabbi Cooper, it's wonderful to be talking to you about this and to do it with the Simon Wiesenthal Center. I obviously have a long time relationship with the center and know I'm speaking to. There are a lot of people on the other side of this that I have known or know in various ways, and I thank you for making the time to join this webinar, because it's so important that every one of us who care about not only the Middle East, but about the world we're living in, better understand what's happening with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. First of all, this is a US-led, US-backed initiative that was designed to provide food for free to the people of Gaza that Hamas can't steal. The initiative for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation actually did not begin during the current administration, during the Trump administration. It actually began more than a year and a half ago, when a handful of individuals were recognizing that one of the issues that was unaddressed, that the world seemed to close their eyes to, was the fact that Hamas, a globally designated terrorist organization, was able to take the largesse of the world, take all this free food and other humanitarian supplies, and use it to either manipulate the people of Gaza, control the people of Gaza, to resupply, to reinforce themselves. I mean, they would take not just trucks of food as they went into the Gaza Strip. They would tax them. They would give a certain percentage to their own fighters. They would control the centralized warehousing in the Gaza Strip so that they could also control the people of Gaza. And no one just dealt with this problem. And everybody was looking at this problem, but no one was really willing to deal with it. And so the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, it was not designed to replace the United Nations. It wasn't designed to compete with the United Nations. It was designed to complement the work of these other organizations by solving a problem that they all had and have. And until very recently, they spoke very openly about it. When we say that 95% of the World Food Program food trucks are diverted, which is or intercepted. These are fancy UN terms for the food was looted either by armed actors or by hungry people. Either way, the food was not getting to where it was supposed to go. When we say that 95% of the World Food Program trucks are intercepted, Rabbi, that's not a figure that we're making up. That's a figure the World Food Program publicly discloses on public websites and public databases. That when the UN says overall 88% of their aid going into the Gaza Strip is being intercepted, that's a figure that's publicly disclosed on the UN's own website and UN's own database. And so there's some dishonest people, I would say, that are lying about this fact even existing. But before people were, lying about it or spinning it, they actually spoke very publicly about this problem. So the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was designed to address this one issue. How can we scale as much food as possible to as many people as possible without our trucks being stolen by Hamas and used to prolong the war and all of these other things? So the plan was incubated quite long ago. It was implemented during this Trump administration. The key moment, I would say, was on May 5th in the White House when the president of the United States lamented the fact and in fact expressed his anger at Hamas stealing food from the people of Gaza. And so a few weeks later, we had stood up an amazing team of American veterans on the ground, of local vetted Gazan partners. And we opened with 4 aid distribution sites, plus now a fifth community distribution site or mechanism that distributes thousands of boxes through local partners. And while I'm talking to you now, we will tomorrow surpass, we almost hit it today, but tomorrow we'll surpass 110 million meals of food provided for free to the people of Gaza in the name of the American people at the initiative of the President of the United States. Not one truck stolen. And we think our beneficiaries well exceed 800,000 Gazans. So that's about half of the people in the Gaza Strip. That's the conservative estimate. It could be closer to 1 million.
So let's take a little deeper dive, if possible. Can you give us a little more insight into who are the people who are working on a daily basis on the ground? And also, what is an average day like for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation? You've mentioned 4 locations. Also, if you can just give us a sort of a report from your own people, how difficult is it for Gazans to reach those locations? And has that led to any changes in the structure, in approach for distribution?
Yeah, I think everyone needs to understand that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is not operating in a ceasefire. Okay, we're operating in the middle of a war and in a very active war. And in fact, for almost 2 weeks of our operation in the Gaza Strip, we were actually operating in 2 wars, because as the 12-day war was happening and everything before and after it, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was the only organization delivering aid during that war into the Gaza Strip. In fact, when the war started, and when the first missiles started flying in the skies, we made the decision to immediately surge additional aid into the Gaza Strip because we didn't know if we were going to be shut out. And so we wanted to get as much in as possible. And unfortunately, we weren't. And every single day, our amazing group of Americans on the ground doing the work every day, they were like everybody else in Israel at the time, up all night with missiles flying in the skies and everything. And that truly, truly challenging situation. But our team showed up every day, and they kept delivering food to the people of Gaza, even in the midst of that war. Uh, our distribution sites are three are in the south, one is in the center. We have a plan, and it has always been our ambition to expand. The next phase was up to 8 sites that would also serve the north of the Gaza Strip. In the meantime, this that I mentioned moments ago, we have this community distribution mechanism where we work with really vetted local Gazan partners to deliver aid to the point of need. So it's like, an Uber for aid, where people need something and we can deliver a box to an elderly person or to a family who can't leave their children to go get food. It's hard to get humanitarian resources in the Gaza Strip wherever you are and whoever you are in Gaza. It's not only an active war, it's an active war with a professional military operating against a terrorist organization, a professional military which, based upon every single thing that we've seen day in and day out in the Gaza Strip, absolutely to the nth degree applies the rules of war and all of the expectations for a professional military, while they're fighting against a guerrilla terrorist group that makes no attempt whatsoever to apply these rules. And they dress as civilians, and they kill civilians seeking aid, to misattribute those deaths either to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation or to the IDF. But these people in the Gaza Strip they're seeking food amidst all of this activity. And the biggest threat to people seeking food in the Gaza Strip is actually not the IDF. The biggest threat to people seeking food in the Gaza Strip, based upon our experience, is Hamas, because it's not just over the course of this war, but Hamas is a type of terrorist organization that emerges out of a terrorist methodology which uses social services in order to control the population. It goes way back, century back, to some early Muslim Brotherhood thinkers, and Hamas understands that in order to recruit fighters, in order to keep control over the people, they built an aid-based economy during their time in charge in the Gaza Strip, and they did it in collaboration with many international organizations. I mean, this is why the United States government is now the official policy of the Department of Justice in this administration is that UNRWA actually doesn't qualify for international organizational immunity, and the United States has issued that opinion in support of several court cases happening now in the United States against UNRWA because of Americans that were injured or killed in October 7th. And so, I mean, UNRWA, I think a lot of people know this, but I'll just reiterate it. I mean, there are reports that UNRWA, up to 40-something%, maybe 50% of UNRWA employees either had some kind of direct connection with Hamas. We know UNRWA employees held hostages. We know that Hamas servers were in UNRWA facilities. We know that weapons were in UNRWA schools. And so there was this quite insidious relationship between this aid-based economy serviced by these international organizations and Hamas. So over the course of this war, Hamas has been able at certain points to use aid to resupply or to exert more control. But they also did things like passing messages and fighters on aid convoys from one part of the Gaza Strip to the other part of the Gaza Strip. So one of the reasons why Hamas has fought so hard to shut down GHF, even though our mission is not political, okay, whatever the implications of our mission have been, and there have been some obvious implications of our mission, we're actually not a political organization at all. In fact, as a condition of operating in the Gaza Strip, we actually told the Israelis that we exist to complement the international organizations, sans UNRWA, because the Israelis won't work with UNRWA, the United States government won't work with UNRWA, but with everybody else, WFP and IOM and UNICEF and all these other organizations, as a condition of us operating in the Gaza Strip, we told the Israelis, we aren't designed to operate alone. We're designed to work in collaboration with these other organizations. And so, we're there for one mission, which is to feed people. And we show up every day to feed people. And we wanted to expand to feed more people in the north. But it wasn't actually Israel that stopped us from expanding in the north. It was the boycott from the United Nations, refusing to work with us and defaming us and trying to do everything in their power to preserve their monopoly. But that monopoly in the Gaza Strip on aid, by the UN agencies, has only served Hamas. And by GHF operating, we actually have taken the system from not being neutral and not being independent and not addressing concerns about humanity, to actually abiding by the principles of international humanitarian organizations, principles of independence and neutrality and humanity.
Right. That's a lot to absorb, but let me try to go just a little bit deeper again. Can you describe for us? We know that in the Holy Land, in the summer, it gets really hot, really, really early. So how early in the day does the people on the ground start their work? The people with military background, are they active U.S. military or former? Are there any non-American volunteers helping in that area? And maybe the most important point of all is, who are the Palestinian people who are the ones who are dealing directly with the hundreds and sometimes thousands of people coming for that food? A little bit more detail if possible.
Yeah. So the way it works is basically in the middle of the night, we pre-position the food at the distribution sites. So when you're talking about serving 1 to 2 to 3 million meals of food every single day, you're talking about tens of thousands of boxes on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pallets that have to be positioned in 4 distribution sites every single day. So our workers, and no one is an active duty anyone. Everyone's retired, but there's former special forces people that have operated in the most complex environments around the world. I mean, the team on the ground is unbelievably experienced. And the irony is, despite the UN opposition to our work, we employ many of their former people. I mean, we have people sitting in our operations center that worked at UNICEF and worked at several of these humanitarian organizations. But the veterans on the ground, who are there at this phase of their life just to feed people and to protect the food and make sure that it's not stolen, they start positioning it all in the middle of the night. Generally speaking, the times are pretty consistent when the sites are open. We communicate directly to the people of Gaza through a consistent messaging system in Arabic. We subsidize it with a flag system. So when the flag turns green, people know when we're open through the messaging, but when the flag turns green, that's when it officially opens. We have separate distribution times and processes for women and for children. We actually do provide some very basic first aid on site. So it's a pretty buttoned up operation. It is when you see video of it, and we just had Bill Hemmer from Fox News spend a bit of time with us. You can see it there on the video. It looks quite chaotic. That chaos is what delivering aid in the Gaza Strip looks like now. Our chaos is a much more ordered chaos than the chaos of the other agencies that are delivering aid, where trucks are, just yesterday, a UN truck was intercepted, and 20 Palestinians died from the UN truck tipping over, and another 30 were injured, because most of these trucks actually don't get very far at all in the Gaza Strip without them being taken over entirely. And we actually can see some of it from our vantage point. It's really crazy. And in terms of our locals, I mean, the amazing thing is we're actually, because Hamas can't control the food supply anymore, because we've disrupted, in effect, the food supply on scale. Okay. And by the way, while there is acute hunger in the Gaza Strip, certainly there are some people, that for various reasons face a threat of starvation. But it's not. There's no famine in the Gaza Strip, okay? And there's nothing, as best as we can tell, anything close to a famine. There is acute hunger in certain circumstances, but where we're operating, it's a much better situation, because people can get food for free and they can get it on scale. And so there isn't the level of hunger where we're operating. Where the hunger exists is where the UN exclusively operates, and where Hamas still has control. But the Gazans that we interact with, Rabbi, finally feel free of Hamas, and they say it, and they're incredibly brave and courageous people, and they're young women that we provide free food to, that express their point of view with courage, because food means freedom in the Gaza Strip. And some of our local Gazan aid workers, who I've come to respect unbelievably as some of the first victims of Hamas to begin with, they are those who paid the highest price. I mean, we lost 12 local Gazan aid workers that Hamas hunted down and killed to try to make an example of them, and to try to disincentivize the people of Gaza to come get food from our distribution sites. This was 6 weeks ago. They did it to try to get people to stop helping us and to stop coming to get food from us. And yet these brave Gazans show up every single day to keep serving their own people and to keep getting food, because they're not scared of Hamas anymore, because Hamas doesn't control their food. And so when people ask, are there Gazans that are not Hamas? And the answer is absolutely. We meet them every single day.
So you mentioned the Palestinian women who are working, showing real courage and also expressing their viewpoints directly to you. And that 800,000, up to 800,000 or so residents of the Strip are getting food from you. What about the nursing mothers? What about baby? What about the special needs for babies and toddlers? And also, because of the culture in the society, are there any opportunities for women to come at a time when they don't have to put up with the sharp elbows of everyone else to actually get to food?
Yeah, for sure. On the latter, we have women only distribution, and it works quite well, and we can scale it and do more of it. And hopefully we will be able to scale all these operations in the coming days, though it's become very difficult for us to scale because of the opposition of the United Nations and European countries that are committed to UNRWA. But in terms of other things, I mean, this is my point about the failure of the United Nations. I mean, we didn't come to compete with UNICEF on taking care of children, or to compete with IOM on shelter. We came just to provide food, and we came to those organizations saying, we understand that these other things are needed. Can we partner together? Can we provide UNICEF materials also at our distribution sites? Can we do it, now through community distribution, all of these things? And the UN just refused to do that with us. And meanwhile, while they were refusing to do it with us, as I wrote about in the Wall Street Journal a week ago, 10 days ago, there were 950 truckloads of not just food, water, baby supplies, hygiene kits, whatever, you name it, 950 truckloads of UN material that were sitting not outside of the Gaza Strip, staged inside the Gaza Strip, that the United Nations wasn't even trying to deliver. And in the meantime, we're saying to them, we see that people need these supplies. Like, if you're not going to do it, we will do it for you. And yet they refused to do it again and again and again. So much so that at one point I became so frustrated that I reached out to the State Department. And because I'm doing this as a volunteer. This is not my job. The Department of State asked me if I would be willing to provide some leadership over this, and I said I would be happy to. But I felt in my heart the only way I could do this and do it well was to do it as a volunteer. And I tend, as a Christian, I listen to those things in my heart. Sometimes maybe I deceive myself, but in this case, I felt very strongly about it. And so I said, I'll do it as a volunteer. But I interact constantly with the State Department. So when I saw all this aid that was not being distributed, I went to the State Department and I said, can some lawyer study whether we can just take it? Because people need it and the UN won't deliver it. And every day we deliver millions and millions of things, and we could deliver millions more. If they're just going to let it sit and rot in the sun, can we just take it and distribute it to people? And by the way, Rabbi, this is even our position with UNRWA. Like, the Israelis are not going to work with UNRWA. The United States of America is not going to work with UNRWA. But there are UNRWA supplies sitting in Egypt. And if UNRWA really cares about the people of Gaza more than they care about their political survival, like we told them, even though no one will work with UNRWA for all these reasons, like, we'll deliver their food. Like, we'll go, just let us go pick it up. We'll take the trucks over to Egypt. We'll pick it up. We'll deliver it for them. But unfortunately, there are a lot of people in suits and ties sitting in New York City and Geneva that profess to be humanitarians, but they're actually just politicians. And I'm sorry to say, but I'm just not sure that they actually care as much about the mission as they say that they do. And I should say also, Rabbi, that there are a lot of people inside of these organizations, and I would say the majority of the people inside of these organizations that are in there for the right reason. And we hear from them almost every day, and they are fed up with their leaders because their leaders won't let them work with us to help people, because that is our only mission. We just are there to feed more people.
You made very serious charge against the United Nations. Could you give us a little bit more details about your efforts to interact with Secretary General Guterres? What happened?
Well, I mean, first of all, as I said from the very beginning, like, we were only willing to do this operation, GHF, if we were there to complement these international organizations. And yet the day we launched, the UN embarked upon a global public relations campaign to dismantle us. And so the Secretary General of the United Nations, the head humanitarian official of the United Nations, numerous other organizations, a letter we believe was organized by UNRWA of 130 NGOs. They, before we even started operating, they started calling for us to be dismantled in the Gaza Strip. And so, excuse me, I'm as you know, Rabbi, from some of our collaboration, I'm a peacemaker. I'm a diplomat. I'm a bit of an optimist. It's like, okay, let's just go sit down with the UN and see if we can work out some kind of agreement. And they wouldn't meet with us. And I met with some organizations that were willing to partner with us, but they were told by the UN that if they worked with us, they would never work with the UN again. And then eventually I wrote a letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations. I wrote the letter the day our 12 local Gazan aid workers were murdered by Hamas. And I asked for a meeting, but more importantly, I asked for him to condemn that, because Hamas needed to hear, and the world needed to hear from the Secretary General of the United Nations, that you cannot kill people who are humanitarians. Okay, you can't do that. And yet, and not only did I not get a reply to the letter from the Secretary General, his office asked me to write a second letter to specifically ask for a meeting. So I wrote the second letter, and then about 2 weeks went by, and I never received a reply from the Secretary General. I received a note from his office saying he was too busy to meet, but he had delegated, literally it said he didn't have time to meet, but he delegated the meeting to the head humanitarian official of the United Nations, Tom Fletcher. And then we attempted to meet with Tom Fletcher, and Tom Fletcher delegated the meeting. And so the United Nations has been unwilling to engage with us. And in the meantime, and we were in a ceasefire negotiation, a failed ceasefire negotiation now, 10 days ago. And it was so crazy to watch because the United Nations was not delivering nearly 1,000 truckloads of food in the Gaza Strip, while in effect joining with Hamas in a global campaign talking about the starvation of people in Gaza. In effect, the United Nations was sitting on the Hamas side of the negotiating table in these ceasefire negotiations, talking about how hungry people were in Gaza while refusing to deliver their own food, and then calling for us, the only consistent large source of food in the Gaza Strip for 2 months, to be dismantled. Like, I don't know how you can square all of this. There is like no rational explanation to this type of behavior. And the truth is, Rabbi, that again, not our purpose. Our mission is to deliver food. But the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation inadvertently, by breaking the monopoly of food in the Gaza Strip and the control of food in the Gaza Strip, and just flooding before all these humanitarians were talking about flooding the zone, we were the ones actually flooding the zone with food. And because we flooded the zone with so much food, I think it's pretty accurate to say that we contributed, and maybe the most significant part of it, to actually forcing Hamas back to the negotiating table. But I would say almost getting the hostages freed, except that when we got to this point, all of a sudden, the United Nations, rather than joining the voice of the rational, reasonable world, calling for a reasonable response to these things, joined the Hamas disinformation campaign, refused to deliver their own food. And then, frankly, and I don't mean to be political, but several very ill-timed things happened when the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and the Prime Minister of France and the Prime Minister of Canada, organized joint statements that basically inferred that Hamas would be rewarded with a Palestinian state if they were in effect obstinate longer, coupled with a conference at the UN on the two-state solution that blew up the ceasefire negotiations. And I just think that the UN is just broken, and we need it to be fixed. But it's not just broken. It's not just that the system is broken. It's that it is actually created to stop wars, created to contribute peace, in the aftermath of the Second World War, to make sure these things don't happen again. Unfortunately, the status quo is it is actually contributing the exact opposite. And this broken aid system, you'd be hard pressed to find any conflict in the last decade where the diversion of aid didn't contribute to the prolonging of a conflict. I'll give you one more example, and I'll be quiet. 2 or 3 years ago, there was a war. I'm not an expert on this, so I'm not providing any commentary on this war. But there was a war between the Ethiopians and the Tigray in Ethiopia. The World Food Program, flour was being provided as humanitarian assistance. That flour was being put through commercial refineries for the Ethiopian army, while the same World Food Program flour, tens of thousands of metric tons of it, was stolen by the Tigray. So a broken humanitarian system was fueling both sides of the war, simultaneously. And I think you can pick a conflict: Iraq, Yemen, Afghanistan, Somalia, Gaza. You go all across the world, and this system, it's just broken. And what GHF has demonstrated is no longer does it have to be the cost of doing business that a huge percentage of your humanitarian assistance can be taken over, controlled, manipulated, monetized, militarized by armed actors.
Okay, I've got two questions out of many. I've heard some rumors, and one of our people asked the question as well. Do you see the possibility or the viability, or even should be considered? The U.S. gives billions of dollars each year to the United Nations. Do you see the possibility of a linkage between some of those funds and the reforming of how the addressing to the issue that you just raised? That's one question, but I may throw in the second question as well. And that is, whenever I can't speak for you, but I can speak for me. Whenever you start talking about, yeah, this is foundation, they've brought in, 10 million, hundreds of million, etc. And the issue is, well, wait a second, we've heard that hundreds of people have been shot at distribution points, that babies have been killed. You yourself been accused in social media of being a baby killer. So it's not just on the periphery in terms of the ongoing war of words and imagery, etc. Can you tell us specifically, because you gave us a lot of details about how the food is distributed, people who have been shot, people who have been hurt, people who've been killed, has that taken place within the framework of the four venues and the fifth one that's now open?
Yeah, thank you for asking this question. It's as important a question as exists. Let me just be clear. GHF does not deny that there have been civilian casualties in the Gaza Strip among those seeking aid. Okay, we don't deny that has happened. We question the statistics, the attribution, the nature and circumstances around these deaths. And let me be specific. The IDF itself has said there have been a handful of occasions where they have made a mistake, and according to their own words, and they have been responsible for some civilian casualties of people seeking aid in the Gaza Strip. And the IDF, when you ask questions about it, they investigate it, they disclose what they find. We think that those are very, very small numbers of people based upon our experience. What no one talks about is the fact that Hamas has killed and injured on purpose many, 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 many hundreds of people seeking aid in the Gaza Strip in order to misattribute those casualties either to the IDF or to GHF. And this is not a theory, because every single time, and by the way this happens is, well, just to provide more context, since this war began, Hamas, which controls the so-called health ministry in Gaza and government media office in Gaza, from the beginning of this war, they basically every day issue a statistic of casualties in the Gaza Strip. And Hamas, aside from the fact that this number is likely not accurate to begin with, but Hamas never distinguishes between militants and between civilians. They just release a number. And some people in the press just report that number as all civilians, whether it's civilians or militants or whatever. When we started operating in the Gaza Strip, Hamas adapted that disinformation strategy, and they started attributing some days 100% of all casualties, civilian or militant, in the Gaza Strip to GHF. It was an intentional effort to try to shut us down. The facts are there have been no incidents where anyone was shot in any of our distribution facilities in the Gaza Strip, not once. There have only been 2 incidents where anyone where there was any violence at all in our distribution sites. One was when Hamas infiltrated one of our sites and threw 2 grenades at 2 of our American veterans and injured them right as the ceasefire negotiations were starting to begin. We think in order to try to provoke the veterans to kill civilians, thankfully, our teams on the ground are incredible, unbelievably experienced, that they didn't, despite their injuries and everything else, didn't take that bait. And then secondly, there was an incident where Hamas infiltrated one of our sites, and it resulted in a stampede that killed a number of civilians. But it was Hamas that did it in the first place. They came into the site with weapons. We have images of them. We have the weapons. All of these things. But this story of people, of GHF sites being death traps and all of this stuff, this is a Hamas lie that was parroted by the press. And it's not a theory. You can go to Rutgers University has something called the National Contagion Research Institute. And they did a report called the Fourth Estate Sale. And this report, which is a peer-reviewed academic report, this is not some advocacy organization, top research scholars. They analyzed the 50 most consumed stories about GHF in our first part of our operation. And of those 50 most consumed stories from all the major media outlets, 80% of those stories, Rabbi, included information that emerged from Hamas directly, yet only half of the time did these media outlets even say the information came from Hamas. Okay. So there has been this like global disinformation campaign. And by the way, it has consequences. Okay. I'm in Washington, D.C., when we tragically 3 months ago, we had 2 Israeli diplomats that were murdered in the streets of Washington, D.C. at point blank range, a wonderful, beautiful young couple. I actually knew one of them. And the person that killed them in his manifesto, allegedly, one of the reasons why he killed them was related to what was disinformation about humanitarian conditions in Gaza. And by the way, some of this disinformation was laundered through the United Nations, including some of the people laundering disinformation against GHF now. And it has an effect. And in my own case, I mean, I hate to even talk about it because there are people at real risk every day in Gaza, our teams delivering food. But in my own case, the threats, I have like a number of threats against my own life. I'm currently under 24/7 protection, not by my choice, but as the decision of law enforcement. And all of the threats relate to these accusations that GHF is starving people and GHF is killing people, which is just insane. I mean, we're the only ones consistently feeding people in the Gaza Strip. But when the New York Times, and again, not to say that there isn't acute hunger, and we're the ones that were also advocating for putting more aid in the Gaza Strip. There is hunger in the Gaza Strip. We got to address this. President Trump is right about this. We need more food in the Gaza Strip. We're not denying that at all. In fact, the opposite. We are being consistent and calling for more of it. But you don't have to put on the front page of the New York Times a picture of a child who has a muscular disorder in order to show that there is real hunger in the Gaza Strip. A picture, by the way, which I understand came from at least if the report I read was true, it came from a wire service. The photographer, middle name was Jihad, by the way, and the picture may have been cropped to take out of the frame another member of the family, another child, who was obviously not struggling with acute hunger. I mean, this whole thing is there's so much disinformation meant to deceive us, and it's really cruel because Rabbi, how much I love and in many ways envious of Jewish values and how I read Jewish texts, and I've even begun thinking about our Old Testament, as we say as Christians, is the Hebrew Bible, really. And it is so insidious for a terrorist organization, with whether on purpose or not, with people in the United Nations, certain people in the media, laundering disinformation that in effect hijacks Jewish values related to caring for the poor and feeding the hungry and all of these things in service to their political agenda. We can simultaneously be clear, as we are, clear as day. We have to get more food in the Gaza Strip now without spreading lies that at the same time advance the interest of a terrorist group that frankly wants all of us gone.
Let me ask one technical question that many people have been writing in about. And then I have one last question, because after all, you are a faith leader. And so we can't let you get away without addressing that issue. What on the ground? So what's the nature of the relationship between the IDF and your group of American vets who are specialists. How does someone said it? Well, the original sin of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is that they cooperate with the IDF, and if you're told that the IDF is an agent of genocide, that automatically would, wash over, and it has in so many ways. So what is the nature of the relationship of the Israeli military to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation on the ground?
It's actually not that different from the relationship historically between other humanitarian actors and COGOT or the IDF. It's a deconfliction relationship. It's just that they understand that we take seriously the diversion of trucks of aid to a terrorist organization, which these other organizations don't. And so, the irony is, for all these accusations of us being, operating at the direction of the IDF and all of these things, which is just not true at all, not even close to true. And in fact, we argue with the IDF quite a bit about things. The irony is that we actually have the same type of relationship that most of these humanitarian organizations have historically had. It's just that I would say, they know that we're not, simultaneously helping a terrorist organization, and I think that's the big difference, and that's our sin. Our sin is that we're unwilling to turn a blind eye to the fact that Hamas can steal food, to put pressure on the local people, to prolong a war, to imperil all of them. And I think that's the big difference.
The foundation receives funding from the U.S. Government. Are there other governments that are involved? Are there private foundations and individuals that are involved? It sounds like if you're going to ramp up to the kinds of numbers, maybe reaching 2 million, and if you're going to have to expand into areas like baby formula, medicines, we didn't talk about the medical, it'll be for another occasion, but where is the funding coming from? And do you have plans to expand it? The fundraising.
Ironically, on the medical front, today we're being attacked by MSF. I would call it an MSF because my French is not very good. I don't know how to pronounce Medicine Sans Frontier or whatever, the French humanitarian organization. They're calling for us to be dismantled. While until today we kept it a secret, but we just put on X the fact that on 3 different occasions this same organization has asked us for help, and so we just published the receipts. And what help were we providing for them? We were sheltering their medicine. Okay, that's what we're going to just go look at it on X. It's all politics. In terms of funding, I mean, one of the things that UN has succeeded at is because of their boycott, it's made it difficult for donor nations to support us, because the UN is using its power on Security Council votes and Security Council seats and other provisions and all of these things to coerce countries and others from helping us. Though I think we're close to making some progress in these areas, but we are our main backer, our main supporter. By far, of course, is the United States of America. We hope the U.S. is going to become even more involved. We are supported by other donor nations. We don't disclose. It's not for us to disclose. It's for them to disclose. And actually, I think more will start disclosing. Actually, as we now have fought a very, very hard fight to survive, despite all these threats and all these attacks and all the disinformation. But we had to, because people needed food. I mean, we have to. And that's what I told our team from the very beginning. We just got to show up every day, whatever's going on, however hard it is, whatever the threats are, whatever our challenges, if we don't have enough or whatever, like, show up every day and feed people.
So in sum, are you saying that there is no starvation in the Gaza? A, B, there are people who are struggling with hunger because of access or financial status or other issues. Would that be a correct summation of what you see, what the Earth GHF sees right now as facts on the ground, as opposed to almost every other outlet, whether it's media, humanitarian NGOs, the United Nations itself. Would that be a way of summarizing your view?
There is not enough food in the Gaza Strip. There are hungry people in the Gaza Strip. There is not a famine in the Gaza Strip. And where the conditions are worse are conditions where Hamas is in control. By the way, Hamas, Rabbi, in the middle of the ceasefire negotiations, started forcing the local markets that exist in Gaza City. They forced them to close in order to exacerbate the hunger crisis, and in order to misattribute that hunger crisis to to others. And so the situation is real. The president of the United States is right. We have to get more food in there. The Israelis are doing the right thing by getting more food in there. There is not a famine in Gaza Strip, in the Gaza Strip, and the situation is what it is because of the failure of the international system. And it's so sad, because if these bureaucrats would have decided to just work with us in the very beginning, a lot of lives would have been saved. I mean, a lot of lives would have been saved. But instead, they decided to hold the whole system of aid hostage over a ridiculous and silly political dispute, it seems, with an organization like GHF. And thank God, it seems like that more and more people within these organizations are coming to their senses, because the people need us, and we're not political. We have no political agenda. We have one agenda, which is to feed people, and that's the faith point too, Rabbi. You know, when people ask me why I chose to do this, you know, not as a volunteer, despite the threats. I mean, and the threats are I had 2 more threats earlier today. It's crazy. Despite all of these things, I'm a Christian. There's nothing more Christian than feeding people, and I love that part of the world. And I work hard to see peace with all of the countries in the region. And for too long, on October 7th, I was flying to Israel that evening, and I was going from Israel to Saudi Arabia later in the week. And instead of going to Israel because my flight was canceled on that horrific day, I decided to get to work for the hostages. And I spoke about the hostages on October 11th, 2023 at the European Parliament. And then 10 days later, I was rallying thousands of evangelicals in Geneva that came from Germany and Austria and Switzerland and Italy in front of the UN Human Rights Commission. And I met with ICRC and even now still, you know, in some way working to try to get the hostages freed. Like, we have to stand against injustice. And the most profane thing in the world is when food can be used either by choice or by mismanagement or whatever, to try to prolong these conflicts and to cause more suffering to people. And I don't know, it's like the whole world is upside down. And yet every single day, I so cannot wait till tomorrow when we surpass 110 million meals for free to the people of Gaza that Hamas can't steal. And hopefully we'll open more sites, and hopefully, you know, we'll be able to help more people, and we'll look back, and the irony will be that in feeding people for free, you know, God willing, we'll bring this long, painful series of years to an end.
Thank you. So just to let you know that among the questions and comments are people who were involved with the situation of real famine in the Sudan. And if maybe there's a headline from all of this, is that without identifying that person, we're hearing, well, there needs to be a Sudanese Humanitarian Foundation on the ground in Sudan, because what you've just described in Gaza is all too familiar to people in other conflict areas. The final question is, you know, we're doing this. You're an honoree from the Simon Wiesenthal Center. Many of the people, especially younger people who are going to hear this message, are making their own life decisions about whether to get involved, whether to go into humanitarian work, whether to take a year off and volunteer to try to make a difference. You're a leader, faith leader. what would you advise someone, a younger person especially, at the fork in the road? Which way should they go?
You have to help people if you can. I remember, and it actually may have been Rabbi Cooper, that I first heard this from. But in Ethics of Our Fathers, where there's that powerful phrase, it's not up to us to complete the task, but neither are we free to desist from it. And the weakness I have as a Christian is sometimes we can have a messianic complex, and like we're here to solve all the problems and do all of these things and everything else. I've given up on all of that. I've just decided that every single day it's my responsibility to just try to make the world a little better. And I don't really care about the opinions of people. Okay. And this is, there's an amazing verse that we have in our Christian Bible that says, if you care about the opinions of people, you cannot serve God. And so if I'm going to wake up every day and decide what I believe and what I'm going to do and how I'm going to invest my time and whether it's risky or not or whatever, based upon what people think or the pressure or the controversy of any of these things, I will never do anything. And in so doing, I'm making a choice. I'm making a choice to have not made my difference in the world. And I just happen to believe, that these that good deeds compound over time, and the way we make the world better for future generations, but also for ourselves, is just to do something. And so if you care about something, you don't have to save the whole world. If you care about something enough to actually care about it, then just do something. And I don't know. I mean, did I ever imagine I would be feeding people in the Gaza Strip? No, that was, if you'd have asked me 3 months to 5 months ago, if I ever would have been doing this. But when the Department of State called me and they said, like, look, this is going to be difficult. It may fail. It may not succeed. It's, and the threats against me are coming from the right and the left. I'm getting it in every direction. But no, you have to. Everybody has to. We all have to do our part, and we have to care a little bit less about what people think about it, and including our politics. I'm watching what politics does for human suffering. Politics in the humanitarian aid system has caused people to die. A lot of people have died. And yeah, we have to do what we can. And it doesn't mean that we'll solve all the problems, but man, we should at least try. There's a phrase we say a lot, which is, we pray like everything depends upon God, and we work like everything depends upon us.
Reverend Johnnie Moore, a international interrupter and a peace-seeking missile. I'm going to turn it over now, as I thank Reverend Moore for his time and for his dedication, back to Eric, so that anyone who's watching it live or later on as a webinar, you might have a lot of questions. Eric's going to give you the best way for you to be in touch through the Wiesenthal Center to Reverend Johnnie Moore. You've been very gracious for your time. There are always more questions to be asked, but I think today you've helped the goal of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, which is to educate people and also to inspire people to take action.
Absolutely.
Back to you, Eric.
Absolutely. Reverend Moore, first of all, thank you for your interesting insights, and even more importantly, for your amazing work. We obviously had many more questions than we could take. So for those who are watching this, either live or even a recorded fashion, if you have additional questions for Reverend Moore, we encourage you to send those to pressinquiries@wiesenthal.com. Once again, that is pressinquiries@wiesenthal.com, and we will make sure those questions make their way over to Reverend Moore. Also, if you would like to join additional webinars like this that we will be holding in the future, again, we encourage you to visit wiesenthal.com, sign up for our newsletter, which will automatically enroll you in notifications for these webinars. With that, thank you again, Reverend Moore, for your really interesting insights. And Rabbi Cooper, thank you as well for leading this conversation. This concludes the webinar. Thank you.